Welcome to Talk Fights. I'm Curtis Biggs. Today I'm going to go over a list of my favorite boxing movies. I've decided to do 11 instead of 10, as there always seems to be at least one selection that doesn't quite make the cut for whatever reason. Also, just for the sake of being different. For me, that movie that barely makes the list is Ali, directed by Michael Mann. Michael Mann's done some great movies like Last of the Mohicans and Heat, but I will say that I was a little disappointed in Ali. I found it a bit slow at times and would have liked to have seen a bit more boxing, but the main reason it barely made my list was Will Smith. A very talented actor, and like Ali, an almost larger-than-life individual, although not quite to that degree, but maybe too recognizable. A good actor in the right role can really become that character. So much so that a person would have difficulty telling the difference between the performer and the real person. Despite having many of Ali's famous phrases and Smith's best attempts at the voice and mannerisms, I just couldn't see past the actor. As hard as I tried, I just couldn't see Muhammad Ali in that movie. All I saw was Will Smith. That's why it is number 11 on my list. Number 10 on my list is Diggstown. This was a difficult decision, and I could have scored this movie quite a bit higher, but it is up against some pretty stiff competition. Diggstown is not a thoughtful, moving boxing film by any means, but it is a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. It stars James Woods as a con man who's just gotten out of prison. He hooks up with Honey Roy Palmer, played by Louis Gossett Jr., and plans on scamming a small town out of $100,000 when they bet them that Palmer can knock out 10 of their best fighters within 24 hours. Although this movie is a bit of an over-the-top comedy, the idea of a fighter fighting multiple opponents in one day is not unheard of. George Foreman fought what Howard Cosell later referred to as the Frightful Five, knocking out all 5 men in one day in Montreal. This movie has big money, treachery on both sides, a murder, a laxative put in a fighter's water, all kinds of hijinks, and an appearance by a former heavyweight boxer and not a bad actor in Randall Tex Cobb. Tex Cobb's biggest moment of his career was probably a knockout of Ernie Shavers. As I said, I really like Diggstown. It is a ton of fun. The boxing scenes aren't horrible, and a really thoroughly enjoyable movie. Coming in at number 9 is Snatch. Stars Brad Pitt as a gypsy bare-knuckle boxer who hooks up with Jason Statham and gets hired to throw some fights for the mob. He of course decides not to throw the fights, and this causes them a ton of problems. This is another fun movie. We have a diamond heist, we have murders, we have mob involvement, we have all kinds of other stuff going on. We have a lot of decent actors in this movie. It is directed by Guy Ritchie and is full of his snappy dialogue. A pretty humorous film, and I enjoyed it very much. Definitely worth watching. Number 8 on my list is The Cinderella Man, starring Russell Crowe and directed by Ron Howard. Those of you who spent some time watching reruns on TV with your grandparents may remember Ron Howard as Opie on the Andy Griffith Show. Years later was Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, and then went on to be a very talented director. He does a great job telling the story of Jim Braddock in a true rags to riches story, going from the depths of poverty to the heavyweight champion of the world. This movie also has Renee Zellweger and Paul Giamatti as Braddock's trainer. It's a very good movie against the backdrop of the Depression. Really worth watching, and the fight scenes are not too bad either. Number 7 is Undisputed. Another movie like Diggstown that wasn't going to take home any awards, but was a really fun and enjoyable thing to watch. The World Heavyweight Champion gets himself into some trouble and is sentenced to some time in prison. The prison also has a boxing champion. The mob boss who runs that prison decides to set up a bout between the two under the London prize ring rules. Both the champ, played by Ving Rhames, and the prison champ, played by Wesley Snipes, have some issues on their way to this secret bout. The mob boss who sets up the bout is played by Peter Falk in one of his final roles. Those of you who are a bit older may remember Peter Falk as Columbo. Those of you who are a bit younger may remember watching Columbo with their grandparents. A lot of action, good fight scenes, and all around a really great job done on Undisputed. I liked it very much. Six is good with Somebody Up There Likes Me. Paul Newman plays tough as nails middleweight Rocky Graziano. Newman does a great job playing the troubled and excitable boxer, showing some of the corruption in boxing at the time and the pressures that it can put on a fighter. It was very well directed by Robert Wise and won Academy Awards for art direction and cinematography. I think it tells the story of a man who messes up but comes back, and messes up, comes back again, and messes up but comes back. An awesome movie showing the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. The Fighter comes in at number 5 for me, with the focus being Mickey Ward. Mark Wahlberg does an acceptable job as Ward, and Christian Bale really nails the role of Dick Eklund, Ward's half-brother. Eklund seems to be a bit of a shady, untrustable character in the movie, where Ward is the more of a stand-up guy. From what I've seen and read, this does seem to be the case in real life, at least at the time that the time period this movie takes place during. Eklund's claim to fame in the movie, and probably in real life as well, is having knocked down Sugar Ray Leonard. Mickey Ward, being the skilled boxer that he is and true warrior, is a great subject for a movie. They did an excellent job and I enjoyed it very much. Definitely worth watching. The Rocky movies are great. Thoroughly enjoyable, fun movies, but just not great films in my opinion. And there's so many of them. It'd take up my whole list if I was to include them individually. I've decided to group them all together at number 4. As far as my ratings for the Rocky movies, I would go 4, 3, 1, 5, 6, 2. That would be my favorite one is when he fights Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren in part 4. Then when he fights Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T in part 3. Then the first one, where he fights Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers. Then the fifth one, where he fights Tommy Gunn, played by actual heavyweight champion Tommy Morrison, although he wasn't heavyweight champion at the time, I don't believe. Then when he fights Mason the Line Dixon, played by light heavyweight champion Antonio Tarver in number 6. And my least favorite one would be his rematch with Apollo Creed in the second movie. My number 3 is The Boxer. Daniel Day-Lewis stars as Danny Flynn in a really excellent movie that, while is very much about the political and social turmoil in Ireland, does have boxing as an integral part of its plot. Flynn, the boxer, is just released from prison and returns to his old neighborhood, though has no interest in returning to his old life. This does prove very difficult considering where he lives and the people that he's surrounded by. Daniel Day-Lewis, as always, does a fantastic job in this role, really becoming this character. He went and trained with former world champion Barry McGuigan for a couple years leading up to this movie, and it does show in his performance very much. The boxing is excellent. Lewis does a great job, a believable job as a boxer, and the fight scenes are pretty decent. Although it is carried somewhat by Daniel Day-Lewis at times, by the time it's over, it does turn out to be a suspenseful and exciting movie. Really a good one to watch. My second favorite boxing movie is Triumph of the Spirit. The true story of Salomon Aroush and his fight in the fight for his life in the Auschwitz concentration camp. An incredible and terrible story of survival through boxing. Well casted with Willem Dafoe as Salamo and featuring Robert Loggia and Edward James Olmos, takes place during World War II, where Salamo, a Greek boxer, and his family find themselves sent to Auschwitz. One of the German officers recognizes Salamo from the Olympics and puts him into the bouts that he and other officers are arranging between the prisoners. This puts Salamo in a horrendous position. Even though the bouts are only for the officer's amusement, the loser is generally executed. Salamo, through great inner turmoil, does what he has to protect himself and his family. Directed by Robert Young in a way that I felt was very fitting. Dark, dirty, very gritty, was very fitting for the situation. The people, the buildings, dirty. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be imprisoned there. The real Salamo supposedly fought over 200 bouts while at Auschwitz. He was eventually liberated, but unfortunately had lost both his parents and siblings in the camps. It is a hard story about a hard man. It's almost a given that number one is going to be Raging Bull. A truly moving, touching, and disturbing film. And a great film. The spot-on performance by Robert De Niro as the Bronx Bull, Jake LaMotta. The beautiful direction by Martin Scorsese. The musical score, the cinematography. All these things together make it one of the most perfect sports movies ever made. From the opening scene of LaMotta shadowboxing in the ring, to the final scene of an aging LaMotta reciting his poetry to himself in a dressing room, is a brutally honest story of a man damaged by his livelihood, wrestling with life, and damaging those around him. With tons of great boxing action and a dynamite true story, this was the perfect role for a talented, gritty actor who Martin Scorsese had in Robert De Niro. Where I had trouble seeing Ali and Will Smith, I can really see Jake LaMotta in Robert De Niro. A good actor can really become that character. Robert De Niro has done this so well I can barely tell the two apart. Often thinking of Robert De Niro when someone mentions Jake LaMotta. One of the more famous scenes in the movie depicts the last fight between Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson, later dubbed the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where Robinson stops LaMotta in the 13th round. In the movie, as soon as the fight is over, a battered LaMotta stumbles over to Robinson saying, "You never knocked me down, Ray. You never knocked me down." I saw an interview with Jake LaMotta where he was commenting on the accuracy of that movie, saying that everything in that movie was 100% accurate. And that's absolutely true. Except for that scene. He said that never happened. He never walked up to Robinson afterwards and said, "You never knocked me down." He said as soon as the fight was over, he had to go sit on the stool for 20 minutes before he could do anything. That sounds reasonable to me. Otherwise, it is just a fantastic movie. Absolutely my favorite boxing movie of all time. See you at the fights. Alright.
Yes!
secret power is sadness.
I knew that was
You knew it. Oh, throwing claws, dirty fool.